Well, let's pick up with the Canadian Labour Congress because its leadership, as we said, is meeting in Ottawa this week. And both the Prime Minister and the NDP leader addressed the gathering today.
I was reminded just last week as I sat down with the good folks at the Chamber of Commerce of this country when Perrin Beatty leaned in and said, you really got to undo that anti-scab legislation. And I'm like, wow, there really are people who don't get it.
And I got to say, one of the key ways we fight inflation, one of the key ways we take on corporate greed, one of the key ways we give more power to workers is with strong unions. You are the bulwark fighting against those challenging times.
Well, with that, we're now joined by the president of the Canadian Labour Congress, Bea Bruske. Bea, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Nice to see you too.
Listen, you know, your event this morning, here you are as the CLC trying to get ready for an election, you know, pushing labor issues to political leaders. But the event this morning quickly became an attack on the Conservative leader. You know, without a doubt, he's leading in the polls. What are you worried about right now?
Well, you know, we want to be ready for an election whenever it might happen. And of course, we don't expect that we'll be in an election until October of 2025, but we know that it could happen much sooner than that. So we really wanted to utilize the once of the 2 times out of the year that Labour gets together to really focus on what our priorities are going into a federal election. And we only really meet 4 days out of a year entirely in terms of bringing everybody in the labour movement together. So today was an opportunity to kickstart the conversation of worker priorities.
Worker priorities, but again, you took really a direct aim at Pierre Poilievre this morning. Why is that?
Well, the reality is that when we look at Pierre Poilievre's track record, fighting against workers, quite frankly, for the 2 decades that he's been an MP, it's very clear to us that he is not the choice for workers to support. And so we wanted to reiterate and restate our goals. Our goals are based on the conversations that we have every single day with workers right across this country in every sector and in every province and territory. You know, the labour leaders that are in that room today represent 3 million workers across Canada. And they hear from their members on a regular and consistent basis about what their priorities are. And on their priorities, we know how Mr. Poilievre and his caucus have voted in the past. So we wanted to ensure that we are very clear on what our expectations are going forward and to really identify and prioritize what the needs are of workers right now. We have an affordability crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have challenges in terms of healthcare delivery, we have challenges in the classrooms, and so we really wanted to take a look at what all of those priorities are, what do we need to do, which parties will be best placed to respond to those in a positive way to find real solutions that workers look for, and that is not the CPC.
Is the reasoning behind the timing, is that because you are looking at the polling numbers right now and are concerned that, for example, the Conservative numbers are much higher than the Liberals and the New Democrats as well?
You know, there's no magic behind the timing. Like I said, we only meet in person 4 times in the year where we actually bring everyone together. And so our next time is not until October. We really wanted to ensure that as we get prepared for a federal election, that we have these conversations early, that we invite politicians whom we've worked with in the past and who have passed good legislation for workers to come and speak to us so that they can hear our feedback on the legislation that most recently has passed, but also on the many, many goals that we have to ensure that workers see a positive pathway for themselves, for their communities, and for Canada.
Okay, so maybe it's worthwhile to talk about what you identify as good policy for workers and what you're worried about as bad policy that might come to workers if the scenario is not what you want it to be.
So when I think about good policies for workers and things that we have been fighting for quite a long time, the Sustainable Jobs Act that was passed earlier this week on Monday is such an integral part of making sure that workers have good family and community supporting jobs that are good union, good paid jobs into the future. That is an act that Mr. Poilievre and his caucus voted against at every stage. This is such an incredibly important act to make sure that workers, as their particular sector and industry is pivoting to meet our net zero emissions goals in the future, that we continue to have good paying and family and community supporting jobs. This is one example of where we continue to need to build on this particular act. It gives workers an absolute seat at the decision-making table along with employers and different levels of government. Those are the kinds of positive things that we want to build on.
So if the polls are correct, if and when the next election happens, it looks like it's going to be a Conservative government. Given how hard you swung at Pierre Poilievre today, does that mean that you don't have a workable relationship with the Conservative leader?
We will, as a Labour movement, talk to any and every politician in order to advance our objectives to stand up for workers and to fight for workers' rights across this country. There are some politicians that we speak to that engage with us in a meaningful way and that want to hear what we have to say and that participate in the conversations with workers. That has not been the track record that we have seen from Mr. Poilievre. We will continue to obviously engage with every politician right across this country, but we know whom we can rely on, and we know that we have a tremendous amount of work that still needs to be done. So today, we chose to speak to politicians that will actually engage with us at that basic level and that will champion worker rights.
Now, this current government only has about 18 months left in its mandate before the next vote. What are your priorities between now and presumably October of 25?
First of all, we have many priorities. Good, sustainable jobs is number one. Addressing the crisis in healthcare is critically important. We have an aging population. We have a lack of workforce coming up in various different healthcare fields. We have a Long-Term Care Act that was just introduced as part of the budget on Monday that we're excited about to actually set standards in long-term care homes. We all saw the impact during COVID of what happened in the for-profit care world. So we want to make traction on those particular issues. The nutrition program in schools. We are hearing from our teacher unions that are here today about the real positive impact that that's going to have on children who will not be who will be able to concentrate because they won't actually be having those hunger pains in their stomachs throughout the day. You know, making sure that we have pharmacare and that we continue making progress on that. Very exciting that we're going to have it for contraceptives and diabetic materials as well as medicines, right? And as well, of course, the dental plan, which so many Canadians are already signing up for and relying on. Those are really positive stories that we want to keep building on, and we want to remind workers of the things that have been achieved in just a short period of time. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention anti-scab legislation. This is huge. This is something that we as workers have fought for literally decades. And we are finally making tangible progress on having anti-scab legislation at the federal level. So that is very exciting, and we're going to continue fighting for those things.
Bea Bruske, I know you and I will speak again. Until then, thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Michael.